Hello and welcome to tonight's talk. I'm Kashif Shahzada, and this talk of mine is aimed at newcomers to the Quran. Specifically, I am going to talk about the importance of studying the Quran, the way in which the Quran is structured. I'm going to talk a little bit about the translations that are available and how to begin your study of the Quran if you are doing it for the first time, if you're coming to the Quran just as a beginner. So, this talk of mine is aimed at newcomers. By the term newcomer, I do not necessarily mean non Muslims, but newcomers also include those who may be born into Islamic households. So, why is this subject important? Why is it important to study the Quran? The reason is there is widespread ignorance within the Muslim community itself. Non Muslims obviously are away from the Quran because it is not a part of their religious upbringing. But Muslims as well, non Muslims aside, many of those who style themselves as Muslims are unaware of the nature, purpose, and application of the Quran. Why is it so? Sadly, due to the prevailing tendency in a vast majority of Muslim societies to recite the Quran in Arabic without understanding. What would they do? They recite the Quran considering the mere chanting of the words to be a blissful act, without any engagement with the meaning behind the words. This is very common amongst the Muslims. There is also, we need to understand, there is also widespread ignorance about the message of the Quran because of a general lack of literacy and education within the Muslim community. As a whole, as a community, Muslims are not very well educated. They are not very literate. You go to Muslim homes, then it is very rare to find a library in the house, a study in the house. Muslims are not, very well read. And same is the situation with the Quran. If you happen to take a walk in a crowded street in a Muslim country and you would stop someone randomly in his tracks and you would ask them, "Excuse me, sir, do you know what does the Quran say about a certain subject? Or could you please quote me the chapter or verse of the Quran?" Chances are that you will receive a blank stare, a nodding of the head, an excuse, or you could very well be signposted to, I quote, an expert, end quote, for such matters. Therefore, I am not differentiating between Muslim and non-Muslim readers of the Quran. I am simply categorizing my audience as newcomers to the Quran. Those who have never come across the Quran before, or who might have in a rudimentary and a basic manner. Be they of any background, any faith. I assume no prior experience or expertise. As long as you can communicate in English, this talk of mine is aimed at you. So, to the newbie, I'd like to address you directly. Okay, so it is for you that I am endeavoring and laboring. My intention is not to preach or proselytize. Also, please don't feel patronized by being labeled as a newcomer, because I think in the process, we are all learning. If you are engaging with me, then I too will be learning something new from your queries. So this exercise is for my own benefit as well as yours. We are all learners, and learners we shall remain. For we should not forget that it is God who is the ultimate teacher. He is the one who is the all-knowing. And the teacher of the Quran is God. We read about it in chapter number 55, verses 1 and 2. Allah says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ar-Rahman allama al-Qur'an. Meaning, it is God most gracious. It is He who has taught the Quran. Who has taught the Quran? God has taught the Quran. God is the teacher of the Quran. God is the one who has the all knowledge, ultimate knowledge, the entire knowledge of the Quran. I take strong exception to those who would proudly label themselves as experts of the Quran. There are no experts of the Quran. Nobody can be an expert of God's book. They could master the books that they have written, but if God's book is the fountainhead of divine and perfect knowledge, then it follows from this basic premise, very basic premise, that the imperfect human mind cannot logically be a master of infinite divine knowledge. The finite cannot master the infinite. That's illogical. We all receive according to our situation and capacity. Okay? So, what you need to do is, if you're a newcomer, obtain a copy of the Quran for personal study. What you need to do? You need to obtain a copy of the Quran for personal study. Have you got a copy? If you don't possess one already, I would request you to obtain a translation of the Quran, especially when you are listening to talks such as this talk, where the Quran is being quoted and it's being referred to. Because I will be quoting extensively from the book during my talks and during the course of my lectures. And as this exercise is meant to stimulate discussion for Quranic understanding, it would be practical, it would be convenient to have your own copy nearby. How can you come and sit in a Quranic lecture and you don't have the Quran with you? You don't do that. So get hold of a translation of the Quran, a personal copy. There are many translations available. There is Abdullah Yusuf Ali, a very famous one. I also carry that on my person all the time. There is Pickthall, which is Old English, but literally it is very close to the Arabic. Arbery, which is also close to the original Arabic, is another version. Muhammad Asad, he has produced a voluminous version with commentary and much more. That's also quite good. So go to any good bookstore and under the religion section, you'll find a translation of the Quran. Choose the one which is an easy read. You find easy to read, just pick it up. Don't worry about, any particular one. Pick up the one which is easy to read. Alternatively, if your local bookstore does not have a Quran, it does not stock it, then you can always browse the web for translated versions. There are online Qurans available on the web for free. You can download the entire Quran. But personally, I prefer the real book in hand, that you can take to lectures and talks and open it up and browse and make notes on. I like that. I personally prefer the printed version than an online version. So, how is the Quran structured? Once you have your own copy handy, have a look at the contents. Open it up and have a look at the contents. After the translator's foreword or any other opening remarks, you will come across the contents. Usually, this is how it is. And chapters will be labeled as surahs. Surah. A chapter of the Quran is called a surah in Arabic. There are a total of 114 surahs in the Quran. The total of 114 surahs in the Quran. The first one is Surah Al-Fatiha. Surah Al-Fatiha, which means the opener. And the last chapter number 114 is Surah An-Nas, which means the people. So the Quran is structured in surahs. It has 114 surahs. The longest surah is surah number 2, Al-Baqarah, which means the cow. It contains 286 verses. While the shortest surah is surah number 108, Surah Al-Kawthar, which means the abundance. It has only 3 verses. So the division of the Quran is initially in surahs or chapters, and then the surahs are further divided into ayat. Ayat are signs. The word ayat, which is the plural form of ayah. Ayah means sign. Ayat is its plural form, means signs or verses. This division of the Quran is not man-made. It isn't that people have divided the Quran into surahs and ayahs. But it is claimed by the divine author in the book internally. We believe that the Quran is God's book. And the author, God Almighty Himself is speaking to us. And in His book, we find internal references to surahs and ayat within the text itself. If you open up the Quran, then the bifurcation of the Quran as a surah or as an ayah is within the text itself. It is within the book. For example, check up chapter number 24, verse number 1. It reads, a surah which we have revealed. So we see that the Quran is divided into surahs. A surah which we have revealed. Chapter number 27, verse number 1 says, these are the ayat of the Quran. So the Quran is divided into surahs and ayat or verses or signs. So surahs are chapters and statements or verses within them are the ayat. And this arrangement is claimed by the author of the text itself. It isn't something done by the publishers. That you need to know. So how do you check up references? If you have your own Quran, if you open up the first surah or Al-Fatiha, as it is called in Arabic, you will note that it has 7 ayat or 7 verses. Each ayah is usually numbered in a translation. You obtain a Quran. So for the sake of brevity, I won't be quoting the full name of the chapter in my lectures, in my talks. If I simply cite the chapter number followed by a colon and then the verse number, that should be sufficient for you to know which verse I am quoting about. So therefore, if I quote to you chapter number 2, verse 185 or 2:185, this means chapter number 2, which is Surah Al-Baqarah, and verse number 185. So you open up your Quran, you see usually every page is titled. It has the surah number. You see Al-Baqarah 2 and you go to verse number 185. Usually most translations have chapter number on the top of every page. So just open up the page and look up where it says what number it is. Just look up Al-Baqarah or surah number 2 and then look for verse number 185. So when you are attending lectures and when you are in a talk, you should also have a pencil at hand to scribble notes and references from speakers. It's a good thing to listen to a speaker attentively and to have your own notebooks and your own writing material with you to make notes and to jot down questions. So have a pencil at hand to scribble notes and references on, even if it is on your own personal copy. Even if it is on your own personal copy of the Quran itself. They act as useful signposts when you are revisiting a topic. If you have your Quran with you and you are going through a reading, then if you have made notes, those notes are very useful. They will sort of revitalize your understanding. So we need to get used to it. As a newcomer to the Quran, you need to get used to this exercise of checking up references of the Quran. Why don't you do this exercise right now as you are listening to me? Check up these references in your Quran and see what they say. If you have your Quran nearby, just get hold of your Quran and open it up and check up what these verses say. Okay, the references that I would like to give you are chapter number 54, verse number 17, then 22, then 32, and then 40. Check up these references of the Quran, please. Chapter number 54, verses 17, 22, 32, and 40. You will be amazed with the discovery. Okay, please do this exercise. This exercise will help you browse the Quran and enable you to look up easily what is written where. So please have your Quran ready, for your study. Have a copy of the Quran for your personal study. This is the first step you need to do. Have your own copy of the Quran with you to study, because many don't. Many Muslims I know, they don't have a Quran for personal study. They might have a Quran for reading in Arabic, just in Arabic for blessings and for ceremony. But we are going into the meaning of the Quran, and for that you need to have your own Quran with you. So have your Quran. This exercise will help you browse the Quran, and it will enable you to look up easily what is written where. So please have your Quran ready, for I'm sure that once you start reading, a profound revelation awaits you in the coming days. So I would like to sum up what it is that I have said in this talk. Number one, it is very important to study the Quran personally and not just rely on ceremonial reading for blessings. That is good, but that is not the entire purpose of Quranic revelation. We Muslims, as well as non-Muslims, need to study the Quran with understanding. And for that, we need to have our own copy of the Quran for personal study. You need to have your own personal copy, a translation. Just get any translation. There are many translations available. Go to a bookshop, look at the various copies that are there, and choose the one that is an easy read, and start reading the translation, for your personal study. Then once you have started reading it, then observe that how is the Quran structured. It is structured into surahs and ayahs. Surah is a chapter and ayah is a verse. So you should know that if you want to check up a particular subject or a theme or a word in the Quran, where it has occurred, then you will find it in a particular surah, and you will have to look up the verse number. So you should know that how the Quran is structured. Chapter number 24, verse number 1. You should know how to find 24:1, or how to find 27:1, or how to find 2:185. So you need to be a bit conversant with the Quran. You need to be a bit familiar with how the Quran is structured. And I have given you a short exercise. Chapter number 54, 17. Open up 54, 17, then 54, 22, then 54, 32, and finally 54, 40. So please check it up and see what these verses say, and in this way you will be a bit more familiar with the Quran and its structure, and with the exercise of how to study it and how to find what is written where in it. Thank you for listening. I am Kashif Shahzada. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.